The gate was taller than Darius remembered gates being, black iron spears, polished until they reflected the gray February sky like a warning. A security guard stepped into the beam of a floodlight and looked him up and down the way people did when they wanted to pretend they weren't doing it. "You're delivering?" the guard asked, eyes already drifting to the old car behind Darius. The back seat was packed with a folded apron, a cooler, and a little pink backpack with a keychain shaped like a star. Darius didn't flinch. He had learned a long time ago that some people fed their confidence by starving yours. He held up a white business card between two fingers. The paper was thick, expensive. It didn't bend in the wind. "I'm here to see Mr. Bennett," Darius said, and the guard's mouth twitched like it wanted to smile and couldn't decide if it was allowed. "Name?" Darius inhaled. The air smelled like wet gravel and money. "Darius Coleman." The guard's radio crackled. Somewhere beyond the gate, beyond the hedges trimmed like geometry, a house sat in the hills. Bennett House, a place that belonged to a different world, a world with cameras that never blinked and silence that cost more than Darius's truck ever had. He felt the business card warm in his hand as if it carried its own heat, like a coal you could hold if you pretended it wasn't burning. And for a split second, he saw a different image. Not the gate, not the guard. A boy's face, pale cheeks, rain on his eyelashes, both hands clenched around a small cardboard tray, as if the tray was the only solid thing left in the universe. A boy who had looked at Darius's food truck like it was a lighthouse. Darius swallowed, and the memory opened like a door. Because to understand why a single free meal had brought him to this gate, why his life was now balanced on the edge of someone else's world, you had to go back. Back to the corner where the streetlights hummed and the asphalt held the day's heat a little longer than it should. Back to 52nd and Larch in Cedar Ridge, West Philly. Back to the last sizzle of the day. The truck wasn't pretty. It wasn't one of those sleek Instagram-ready machines with neon lettering and a spotless window where customers could see smiling staff in matching hats. Darius's truck had dents, a patch of primer on the side where he'd sanded down rust and promised himself he'd paint it when he could afford to paint it. But the grill worked. The fryer worked. The flat top was seasoned the way a good pan should be, blackened by 1,000 mornings, shiny in places where the spatula had scraped it smooth. And the smell that drifted out of the service window when Darius opened it, that smell did more marketing than any social media post ever could. Smoke, spice, warmth. Dee's plate was painted across the side in bold letters that made people laugh when they first saw it, then come back because the joke tasted like home. The corner at 52nd and Larch was its own kind of stage. A bus wheezed up and sighed open. A man in a worn Eagles hoodie argued into his phone like the person on the other end could change the world if he yelled loud enough. A woman with grocery bags walked fast, shoulders raised, eyes forward. West Philly had taught her to keep moving. Now Darius stood inside the truck, shoulders broad under his black hoodie, forearms strong and marked with little burns that came from years of cooking. His skin was deep brown, the kind that looked almost purple under streetlights. He moved with that quiet economy of someone who had never had time to waste. He flipped chicken on the flat top, and it sang. The sound was a little prayer, hot metal and oil sizzling like applause. In the corner of the truck, perched on a stool that had once been meant for adults, was Sloane. She was small, 6 going on 30 when it came to opinions, and she wore a puffy jacket with a hood that made her look like a determined little astronaut. Her braids were gathered into a ponytail that bounced when she nodded along to the music on Darius's phone. A spiral notebook rested on her knees. She was drawing something with a purple marker, tongue pressed between her teeth in concentration. "Daddy," she said without looking up, "that lady today, the one with the long nails, she said you should smile more." Darius snorted and slid a sandwich into a paper tray. "Did she now?" Sloane finally glanced up, eyes serious. "I told her you smile when you're happy, not when somebody orders you to." Darius froze for half a second, then laughed. One of those laughs that came from somewhere behind the ribs where the day's stress lived. You told her that? Sloane nodded like a judge delivering a verdict. Yes, because you're not a robot. Darius reached over and tapped the brim of her hood. You're my favorite person. I know. She went back to drawing like the conversation was done. Darius turned toward the window just as another customer stepped up. A young guy, tired eyes, hands shoved in his pockets. What you got left? He asked. Darius smiled, not because he was told, but because he wanted to. What you hungry for? That was his talent, the thing that kept his truck alive. He didn't just sell food. He read people. He watched shoulders. He listened for the small stutter in a voice that meant someone hadn't eaten all day. He noticed who counted coins before they spoke. He could guess what someone needed from the way they stood, because he'd been on both sides of hunger. Once he'd been the kid staring at something he couldn't afford, pretending he wasn't. Once he'd been the man trying to act like there was no fear in his wallet. Darius wasn't always a food truck owner, and he'd done a lot of things. Warehouse shifts, security gigs, delivery routes that ate up his knees. Cooking had started as a way to stretch cheap groceries into something that tasted like dignity. Then it became the only thing that felt like his. After the marriage ended, after the quiet, slow unraveling that left him standing in a small apartment with Sloane's toys on the floor and an empty space on the couch that still looked like someone should be there, he'd needed something steady, something that didn't leave. Food didn't leave. Food stayed. Food held people together. He had no partner now, no second income, just him and a little girl who asked questions that went straight through his defenses. And every day, he promised himself the same thing. Sloane would not feel the kind of fear he'd felt growing up. Or she would not count pennies in the dark and call it bedtime. She would not hear adults whispering about bills like they were monsters, even if he had to burn his hands on hot metal to keep that promise. That evening, the line was thinning. The sky had lowered into a blanket of cloud, the kind that made the world look like it was holding its breath. A fine rain started to fall, light enough that people pretended it wasn't raining until it soaked through. Darius wiped his hands on his apron and checked his supplies. Not much left. A few pieces of chicken, a scoop and a half of rice, some slaw, a couple buns, a final handful of herbs in a container that had seen better days, enough for maybe 2 orders, if he stretched. He glanced at the small cash box under the counter and did the math automatically, the way his brain always did. Her rent, gas, groceries, Sloane's school field trip fee that she hadn't mentioned because she knew he got that tight line between his eyebrows when money was short. He exhaled slowly. We almost done, he told Sloane. She lifted her marker like a toast. Finally, my hands are cold. He reached into the small cabinet and pulled out a pair of fingerless gloves, then slid them toward her. Put these on. Sloane slipped them on like she was gearing up for battle. Thanks, Daddy. Darius turned back to the window, and that was when he saw him. Not in line. Not walking with anyone. Just standing a few steps away from the truck. Close enough to smell the food. Far enough to pretend he wasn't there for it. A boy. Maybe 10. 11. He wore a dark coat that looked expensive, the kind you'd see in a store window downtown. But not on a kid standing alone in West Philly rain. The coat was damp at the shoulders. His hair was neat but flattened by water. His sneakers were clean. Too clean for this street, too clean for someone who'd been walking a while. He didn't look like he belonged to the corner. But he also didn't look like he belonged anywhere else at the moment. His face was pale in the streetlight, lips slightly parted. His eyes were fixed on the service window like it was a movie screen. He wasn't begging. He wasn't calling out. He was just watching. Hunger had 1,000 faces. Darius had seen most of them. This one was quiet. This one was pride wrapped around an empty stomach. Darius leaned forward slightly, voice gentle. Hey, lil' man. The boy flinched like he'd been caught. Darius softened his posture, palms open. Oh, you okay? The boy's eyes darted away, then back. I'm fine. His voice was thin, the way voices got when kids were trying not to cry. Darius glanced around. No parent, no older sibling, no adult looking frantic. Just rain and the bus stop and people in their own worlds. "You here with somebody?" Darius asked. The boy swallowed. "No." Sloane had gone quiet behind him. Darius could feel her watching. Darius kept his voice low. "What's your name?" A pause. The boy's jaw tightened. "Owen," he said finally. "Owen Bennett." Something about the name sounded polished, like it came from a household where people said please with perfect diction. Darius nodded like it meant nothing. "I'm Darius. That's Sloane." Sloane leaned forward. Her eyes were sharp, kind, curious all at once. "Hi." Owen looked at her, startled. It like he hadn't expected a kid his age, well, younger, to be in the truck. His gaze drifted to her gloves, to her notebook. Then, very quietly, he said, "Hi." The rain grew steadier. The streetlights made it look like the whole world was full of falling threads. Darius rested his hands on the counter. "You hungry, Owen?" Owen's throat bobbed. "I'm not," he started, and Darius heard the lie for what it was. Armor. Sloane leaned closer. "You can just say yes," she whispered like it was a secret tip. Owen's eyes flicked to her, then down, his cheeks colored with embarrassment. "I haven't eaten." Darius nodded once, like that settled it. "All right," he said. "Come up here." Owen hesitated, feet planted. "I don't have money." Darius reached behind him and lifted the lid on the container with the last of the chicken. The smell rose, rich and warm, and Owen's eyes widened involuntarily. "Tonight's your lucky night," Darius said. "I'm about to close. Got a little left. I don't like wasting food." He grabbed a bun, split it, toasted it on the flat top. He scooped rice like he was measuring hope. He layered chicken, slaw, a drizzle of sauce, herbs sprinkled like confetti. He worked slowly, deliberately, like he was making something sacred. Because he was. A meal could be many things. A bribe, a transaction, a routine, but a free meal. A free meal could be a statement. "I see you." Darius slid the tray out the window toward Owen. Owen stared at it like it might vanish if he blinked too hard. "You sure?" Owen asked, voice shaking. Darius met his eyes. "I'm sure." Owen's hands came up, and Darius noticed then what he hadn't before, a slim band on the boy's wrist. Like a watch, but not quite. It was black, sleek. The kind of thing that didn't belong in a school cafeteria, but might belong in a high-security household. Owen took the tray with both hands. His fingers tightened around the cardboard edge so hard they went white. He didn't eat right away. He just held it close and breathed in, eyes fluttering shut for a moment, like the smell alone was doing something to him. Sloane's voice was soft. "It's good. He makes it good." Owen opened his eyes. "It smells like..." He stopped, like the word he wanted was too dangerous. Darius's chest tightened. "Go on," Darius said gently. "Eat while it's hot." Owen lifted the sandwich slowly. His hands were trembling. He took a bite, and then everything in his face changed. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a movie moment with tears falling immediately and violins swelling. It was quieter than that. His shoulders dropped. His eyelids fluttered like he was bracing for pain and didn't find it. His mouth moved slowly, carefully, like he didn't want to rush the feeling. He swallowed, and his eyes got glossy. Owen looked down at the sandwich like it had spoken to him. "This is..." he whispered. Darius didn't push. He just nodded. "Yeah." Owen took another bite, faster this time. A little urgency slipped through. Hunger finally allowed to exist. Sloane watched him with a serious expression, like she was witnessing something important. Darius turned to start cleaning, to close down, to pretend this was just one more moment in a long day. But the corner had a way of not letting you pretend. A car pulled up that didn't belong here. Not a normal car. A glossy sedan with windows tinted dark, like it carried secrets. It parked too close to the curb, blocking the bus stop a little because its owner assumed rules were for other people. The driver's door opened, and a woman stepped out in heels that clicked like punctuation. She was dressed like she'd come from somewhere warm and quiet. A long coat that probably cost more than Darius's monthly rent. Hair perfectly styled, not a strand out of place despite the rain. She approached the truck without looking at the line, because she didn't believe in lines. She rapped her knuckles against the service window as if Darius wasn't already there. "Hello?" she called. "Are you open?" Darius wiped his hands calmly. "I'm closing up, ma'am. I can take one more order if you—" "I'm in a hurry," she cut in, the eyes scanning the menu like it was written in a language she didn't respect. "Just make me whatever your best thing is, and quickly." Her gaze dropped to Owen, who was standing off to the side, still holding his tray. She frowned. "Is he with you?" Owen stiffened, pulling the food closer like a shield. Darius's jaw tightened. "He's eating." The woman's nose wrinkled slightly, as if she'd smelled something unpleasant that wasn't the food. "I don't want him near my car, and I certainly don't want to wait because you're—" She gestured vaguely at Owen, like the boy was a distraction. Darius felt Sloane shift behind him, silent but alert. She had seen this before, grown-ups who acted like kindness was optional and respect was reserved. Darius kept his voice even. "Ma'am, you can place an order like everyone else. And you can wait like everyone else." The woman blinked, clearly unused to hearing no. "Excuse me?" she said, tone sharpening. "Do you know who I am?" Darius didn't. He also didn't care. "I know you're a customer," he said, "and I know I'm closing. You want food? You can be respectful." Her eyes narrowed. She leaned in, lowering her voice as if she was giving him a private lesson. "You people are always so—" She stopped, choosing her words carefully in the way people did when they wanted to insult you without being held accountable. Darius's blood heated, not for himself. He'd been called things. He'd been underestimated. He'd been watched by security guards in stores, as if his skin was a crime. But Sloane was right there, Owen was right there, and Darius had no patience left for cruelty. "You're done," Darius said, a voice quiet. The woman straightened. "What did you just say?" "I said you're done," Darius repeated. His eyes held hers steadily. "I'm not serving you. You can take your car and your attitude and go find somewhere else." The woman's mouth fell open in shock. "You can't refuse me," she hissed. "I'm paying. That's the point. I'm paying and you're serving." Darius leaned forward slightly, not aggressive, just immovable. "No," he said. "The point is I decide what kind of place this is. And in my place, we don't treat kids like trash." The woman's gaze snapped to Owen. "Kid? That kid doesn't belong here. Look at him. He's probably—" Owen flinched. His fingers tightened on the tray. His eyes dropped, like shame was something he'd been taught to carry. Darius stepped out from behind the window, opening the truck's side door. Then he climbed down, boots hitting wet pavement. He stood between the woman and the boy, not with fists, not with threats, with presence. It was the kind of presence that came from being a black man who had learned how to hold his ground without giving anyone an excuse to call him dangerous. The kind that came from a father who knew his child was watching. Darius's voice was low. "You don't get to talk about him like that." The woman's eyes flicked over Darius, assessing him like an object she couldn't categorize. "Unbelievable," she muttered. "This is why this neighborhood—" "Leave," Darius said simply. For a moment it seemed like she might argue more, like she might call someone, like she might try to turn the world against him with a phone call and a story that made her the victim. But the rain was falling, and people nearby were watching now. A few customers, lingering, a man at the bus stop, someone with a hood up, filming without making it obvious. The woman realized the scene wasn't going her way. She scoffed and turned sharply, heels splashing in a puddle. She strode back to her car, yanked the door open, and slid inside with the fury of someone who had just been told she wasn't a queen. The car pulled away fast, tires hissing on wet street. The corner exhaled. Darius stood for a second, breathing hard through his nose, then turned toward Owen. The boy was staring at him with a look that didn't belong on a kid, a look like someone had just handed him proof that the world could be different. "You didn't have to do that," Owen said. Darius crouched a little so he wasn't towering. "Yeah," he said gently. "I did." Owen blinked fast, like he was trying to keep his eyes from spilling. Sloane's voice drifted from the truck. "Daddy's scary when he's nice." Darius shot her a look. "Girl?" Sloane grinned. Owen's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. Darius straightened. "All right. Now we gotta figure out where you belong." Owen swallowed. I got a number." He pulled a small phone from his pocket. The screen was cracked, like it had been dropped. He scrolled with shaking fingers, then held it up. "Call this," he said. It's my dad." Darius paused. "Your dad?" he repeated. Owen nodded once, stiff. "He'll come." Darius took the phone carefully and dialed. The rings sounded loud in the damp air. 1 ring, 2, 3. Then a voice answered, deep, calm, controlled. "This is Bennett," the man said. So Darius blinked at the sound. Something in the tone made Darius's spine straighten. "Hello," Darius said. "My name is Darius Coleman. I'm calling because your son, Owen, he's with me. He seems lost. He's okay, but—" Silence, just a fraction too long. Then the man spoke again, slower. "Where are you?" Darius glanced at the street sign. 52nd and Larch. Another pause. "I know," the man said. Darius frowned. I know," the man repeated, and there was something faint in the background of the call, like a low hum of technology, like a room full of screens. Darius's grip tightened on the phone. "Sir, I'm just trying to—" "I'm watching," the man said. The words landed like a cold hand on the back of Darius's neck. Darius's eyes flicked to Owen's wrist, that sleek black band. "What do you mean you're watching?" Darius asked, and voice sharpening despite his attempt to stay polite. The man's response was immediate, as if he'd expected the question. "Owen has a tracker," he said, "and a safety camera. It's embedded in the band on his wrist. It's for his protection." Darius stared at Owen. The boy's face went blank, like he'd heard this before and didn't want to feel anything about it. "You've been watching this whole time?" Darius asked, anger rising. "You saw him alone in the rain and you—" "Stay where you are," the man interrupted, tone still calm but now threaded with steel. "I'm on my way." Then the line went dead. Darius lowered the phone slowly, chest tight. Sloane leaned out the truck door. "Daddy?" Darius swallowed. "It's his dad," he said. "He's coming." Owen looked down at his food again, chewing more slowly now, and the warmth in his hands seemed suddenly fragile. Darius crouched near him. "Owen," he said softly, "why were you out here alone?" Owen's mouth worked. His eyes flicked away. "I didn't mean to be." Darius waited. The rain pattered on the truck's roof. The streetlights buzzed. Owen whispered, barely audible, "I wanted to get away." Darius's throat tightened. Kids didn't run away because they were bored. They ran away because something inside the house was louder than the fear outside. Before Darius could ask more, the corner changed. The air shifted, as if the neighborhood sensed an approaching tide. 2 black SUVs turned onto Larch and rolled toward them, slow and deliberate. Their headlights cut through the rain like blades. People at the bus stop stepped back. A man crossing the street paused. And even the corner store's neon sign seemed to dim in the presence of the vehicles. The SUVs parked with precision. Doors opened. Men got out, tall, broad, dressed in dark coats, scanning the street with the smooth efficiency of professionals. Security. Then a third vehicle pulled up behind them, a sleek black sedan, quieter than the SUVs like it didn't need to announce itself. The rear door opened. A man stepped out. Harrison Bennett didn't look like a billionaire in the flashy way movies showed. He wasn't dripping diamonds. He wasn't smiling with teeth too white. He looked exact. Everything about him seemed measured. His posture, his stride, even the way he held his umbrella angled perfectly so rain slid off in a controlled sheet. He was in his 40s, maybe early 50s, odd with hair trimmed neatly at the sides and a face carved by responsibility. His coat was charcoal gray, his shoes polished, his expression unreadable. His eyes locked on Owen immediately. Owen stiffened, shoulders rising. Harrison crossed the wet pavement without rushing. His security hovered a few steps back, giving him space but watching everything. When Harrison reached Owen, he didn't grab him. He didn't scold him. He knelt. Right there on the wet sidewalk, in a coat that probably cost more than Darius's truck. He looked at his son as if he was checking for damage he couldn't see. "Owen," Harrison said, voice lower now, softer in a way that surprised Darius. "Are you hurt?" Owen shook his head, jaw tight. He didn't look relieved. He looked braced. Harrison's gaze shifted to Darius, and in that moment, Darius felt it. In that sensation he hated. Being assessed. Not in a who are you way, in a what are you way. Harrison's eyes flicked over the truck, the menu, the grease stains on Darius's apron, the little girl watching from the doorway. Then Harrison said, "You're Darius Coleman." Darius didn't like that Harrison already knew his name. "Yes," Darius said, voice cautious. "And you're—" "Harrison Bennett," the man replied, as if introductions were a formality for other people. Harrison stood and reached for Owen's wrist gently, turning it to check the band. He tapped it once with his thumb. Owen flinched. Harrison noticed. His fingers paused. Darius saw it then. Something small in Harrison's face, like regret trying to surface and being pushed down by habit. Harrison looked back at Darius. "Thank you," he said. Then Darius didn't answer immediately. Gratitude from a powerful man could be a trap if you didn't know what it came with. "You said you were watching," Darius said, not hiding the edge in his voice. "You saw him alone." Harrison's gaze stayed steady. "I saw him leave the perimeter," he corrected. "And I saw him approach your truck." "And you didn't come until now," Darius said. Harrison's jaw tightened slightly. "I had eyes on him," he said. "I knew he was not being harmed." Darius's anger flared. "He's a kid in the rain. That's harm." Harrison's eyes narrowed, not in hostility, but in something like surprise that someone would say that to his face. Then Harrison looked at Owen again, and his expression softened a fraction. "Owen," Harrison said, "why didn't you answer your phone?" Owen's voice was flat. "Because it's always you." The words were small, but they hit like a stone. Harrison's hand lowered. Darius felt something shift, not just between father and son, but in the air like the night itself had become heavier. Sloane spoke from the truck doorway, voice clear as a bell. He was hungry. Everyone turned to her. Sloane wasn't intimidated by SUVs or tailored coats. Sloane was the kind of child who saw the truth and said it. Harrison's gaze landed on her. "You're—" he started. "Sloane," she said proudly. "That's my daddy." Darius felt heat behind his eyes at the way she said it like it was the most important fact in the world. Harrison looked at Darius again. "He ate," Harrison said quietly, and it wasn't a question. Darius nodded. "He did." Harrison's eyes flicked to the tray in Owen's hands. Half finished, be held carefully, like it mattered. Harrison's voice grew even quieter. "He hasn't eaten properly in weeks." Darius blinked. "What?" Harrison exhaled slowly. The rain tapped his umbrella like impatient fingers. "My wife passed," Harrison said, and the words were plain, stripped of drama. 3 months ago. Since then, Owen has been difficult, withdrawn. He refuses most food. He avoids people. Owen's shoulders tightened like he didn't want this said out loud. Harrison's gaze stayed on his son as he continued. Tonight he left. He walked until he found something that made him stop. He looked at Darius then. Really looked. "And you fed him?" Harrison said. Darius's voice was rough. "I fed a hungry kid, that's it." Harrison's eyes didn't waver. "No," he said. "It wasn't, that's it." He paused, and for the first time, his control slipped enough for something real to show through. "I saw what happened," Harrison said. "With the woman. The way you stood between Owen and her." Darius's jaw tightened. "She was out of line." Harrison nodded once. "Most people don't step in," he said. "Most people look away, especially when it's inconvenient." Darius felt the weight of those words. The world was full of people who looked away from kids like Owen and men like Darius for different reasons, but the effect was the same: loneliness. Harrison reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a business card holder. He slid one card free and held it out. The card caught the streetlight. White, thick, minimalist. Just a name, a number, an address. Darius stared at it, suspicious. Harrison said, "I want to offer you a job." Darius blinked. "Well, what?" Harrison's voice was calm, but it carried a strange urgency beneath the control. "I need someone at the house who can cook," he said. "A private chef. For my family." Darius's laugh came out sharp, disbelieving. "You have people for that." "I have staff," Harrison corrected, "but none of them can do what you just did." Darius frowned. "Cook?" Harrison's gaze flicked to Owen again. "Reach him," he said. Owen's fingers tightened around his tray. Darius felt Sloane step closer behind him, her small hand gripping the edge of his apron. Harrison continued. "Owen responded to your food, and he responded to you." Darius's stomach twisted. He had expected a thank you, maybe a donation, maybe trouble. He hadn't expected this. "What kind of job?" Darius asked carefully. Harrison's tone was businesslike again, and as if he was handing Darius a contract and not a pivot point for his whole life. "Full-time," he said. "Monday through Friday with flexibility. You would live off-site if you choose, or on-site if you prefer. Salary is—" He named a number. Darius's brain rejected it at first. It sounded like something you said in movies when you wanted to show wealth quickly. Darius's throat went dry. That's not—" "It is," Harrison said. No arrogance, just certainty. Darius's mind raced. Rent, bills, Sloane's school, savings, a car that didn't cough in winter, groceries without counting. Then another thought crashed in. Cold. The difference between their worlds. A black man from West Philly walking into a billionaire's house as an employee. A single father bringing his child into a place that might smile politely while holding judgment behind its teeth. Darius looked at Owen. The boy stood silent, rain on his lashes, food held like treasure. His face wasn't begging, but something in his eyes was watching Darius the way he'd watched the truck, like a lighthouse. Darius exhaled slowly. "I can't decide that right now," he said. Harrison nodded like he'd expected resistance. "You don't have to," he said. "Take the card. Think about it." Darius didn't move. Harrison's eyes softened again, just slightly. "I'm not offering charity," he said. "I'm offering work, and I'm asking for help." Those words, asking for help, sounded strange, coming from a man who arrived with SUVs. Darius finally reached out and took the business card. The moment his fingers touched it, that he felt how heavy paper could be when it carried the weight of a new life. Harrison straightened and glanced at Sloane. "And your daughter," he said, voice gentler. "She can come. There's no reason she should be excluded from your schedule." Darius's chest tightened. "She's my priority," he said like a warning. Harrison nodded. "As she should be." Owen shifted slightly. His gaze flicked up to Darius, and for the first time, his voice held something like hope. "Will you?" Owen started, then stopped, swallowing the rest. Darius's throat tightened. He crouched again, looking at Owen. "You get home," Darius said softly. "You hear me? Safe." Owen nodded once, stiffly, like he didn't trust softness. Harrison placed a hand lightly on Owen's shoulder. "We're leaving," he said. Owen looked at his half-eaten sandwich, then at Darius, and then back at the sandwich. Darius understood. "Take it," Darius said. "Finish it." Owen's eyes widened, almost startled by permission. He nodded and clutched the tray tighter. Harrison glanced at the food briefly, then looked at Darius. "Thank you," he said again. This time the words sounded less like politeness and more like something he meant. Then the billionaire and his entourage turned and walked back to their vehicles, umbrellas moving like dark wings in the rain. The SUVs pulled away, and the corner slowly returned to itself. Bus brakes sighing, footsteps splashing, life resuming. But Darius didn't move for a long time. Sloane climbed down from the truck and stood beside him, her small body pressed against his leg. "Daddy," she whispered. "Are we gonna be rich?" Darius huffed a laugh that sounded more like a breath-breaking. "I don't know, baby." Sloane looked up at him, rain speckling her hood. "But you looked like you were gonna cry." Darius blinked hard. "I'm not gonna cry." Sloane tilted her head. "Okay, but your eyes are doing that shiny thing." Darius knelt and pulled her into his arms. He held her tightly, breathing in the scent of her hair, shampoo and childhood and the reason he kept going. "I'm okay," he murmured into her hood. "I'm just thinking." Sloane's voice was muffled against his chest. "Think about getting me a bigger room." Darius laughed despite himself. "You already got a room." "It's tiny," Sloane complained. "My dolls don't have space." Darius kissed the top of her head. "We'll see." He stood, carried her back into the truck, and began cleaning up with hands that weren't steady anymore. Because the corner had given him something he hadn't asked for. A door. And doors were complicated. That night, the rain followed him home. The apartment was on the second floor of a building that smelled like old carpet and fried food from someone else's kitchen. The hallway light flickered like it was tired. Darius carried Sloane inside. She fell asleep on the couch almost immediately, her gloves still on, her notebook open on her lap. A half-finished drawing of the food truck sat on the page, with little stars around it like it was a superhero. Darius stood in the small kitchen and stared at the business card. Harrison Bennett. The letters were simple, clean. No titles, no bragging, just a name that sounded like power. Could Darius set the card on the table and poured himself a glass of water? He drank like his body needed to remind itself it was real. His phone buzzed. A text message from a number he didn't recognize. Unknown. "This is Mr. Bennett's assistant. Mr. Bennett asked me to confirm you arrived home safely. If you have questions about the position, I can answer them." Claire Darius stared at the screen. Even that, someone checking if he got home, felt like something from another world. Not because people didn't care, but because powerful people usually didn't have time to care about strangers. Or maybe Harrison was the kind of powerful that got lonely. Darius's mind drifted back to Owen's face when he took the first bite, to the way his shoulders dropped, to the way his eyes had looked like someone turning a key in a locked door. Darius glanced toward the couch where Sloane slept with her mouth slightly open, peaceful. Then his gaze dropped to the stack of mail on the counter. Bills, notices, reminders, the real world, in envelope form. Darius picked up the business card again. His thumb rubbed the edge of the paper, feeling its thickness. He thought about his last relationship, how he'd tried to build a life with someone who wanted the dream without the work, who loved him when he was useful and resented him when he was tired. How it had ended not with a dramatic blow-up, but with a slow erosion, little disappointments, little arguments, little silences that became permanent. He'd told himself he was done trusting people with power over his heart. But this wasn't romance. This was work. This was survival. And still, at the idea of stepping into someone else's universe made his stomach twist. Because Darius knew what rich spaces did to people like him. They smiled while holding assumptions. They praised your work while ignoring your humanity. They treated you like a background character in their story. And Darius had spent too many years fighting not to disappear. He walked to the window and looked out at the street below. Rainwater gathered in cracks, reflecting streetlights like broken mirrors. Somewhere, Owen was probably inside a house with ceilings too high and rooms too quiet. Somewhere, Harrison was probably staring at a screen full of data, trying to solve grief like it was a problem. Darius thought of the woman at the truck, Madeline Ashford, how she'd assumed she could buy obedience. He thought of Harrison, kneeling in the rain. Yeah, not every rich person was the same, but every rich house had rules. Darius exhaled slowly. He typed a response. Darius, thank you. My daughter and I are home. I have questions. What would the schedule be, and would my daughter be allowed to be with me? The reply came quickly. Claire, yes, your daughter would be welcome at the house. Mr. Bennett's priority is Owen's stability and your ability to work without stress. Schedule can be tailored. Salary and benefits are as stated. Mr. Bennett would like to meet you in person if you're open to it. Darius stared at the words, without stress. He laughed quietly, a sound that held no humor. Stress was the air he breathed. But maybe, just maybe, there was a world where his stress could be lighter. He looked at Sloane again. She shifted in her sleep, murmured something about pancakes. Ian smiled faintly. Darius's chest tightened. He sat at the table, business card in front of him like a dare, and he made a list in his head because that's what men like him did. Men who couldn't afford to be reckless with hope. Pros, money, stability, Sloane's future. A chance to build something bigger than a corner. Cons, being in a rich man's house, being watched, being judged, losing control of his life. Then there was something else, harder to admit. A boy who needed him. Not because Darius was a savior, not because Darius was special, but because Darius had been kind when it mattered. Kindness was rare enough that it could change a kid's trajectory. Darius stared at the business card until the letters blurred. He didn't decide that night. He just sat there until the rain quieted. Until the apartment felt like a small boat in a big, indifferent city. Until his phone buzzed again with another message from Claire. Claire. Mr. Bennett will be at home tomorrow at 3 p.m. if you'd like to come. Address is on the card. If you decline, no pressure. He asked me to make that clear. Darius read it twice. No pressure, from a billionaire. He rubbed his face with both hands and let out a long breath. He walked to the couch, lifted Sloane gently, carried her to her bedroom. He tucked her in under a blanket with little moons on it. She stirred, eyes half opening. Daddy? Yeah, baby, he whispered. She reached out and grabbed his shirt with sleepy fingers. Don't be sad, she murmured. Darius's throat tightened. I'm not sad. Sloane blinked slowly. Then don't be scared. Darius froze. Kids were terrifying like that, how they could name what you were trying to hide. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. Okay, he whispered. I won't. Sloane's fingers relaxed. She rolled over and fell asleep again, trusting him with the kind of trust that could break a man if he wasn't careful. Darius stood in the doorway and watched her breathe. Then he walked back to the kitchen, picked up the business card, and stared at the address. Bennett House, Winmore Hills. A place where lawns were probably cut in perfect lines. A place where doors weighed more than his car. A place where Owen lived. Darius set the card down, turned off the light, and went to bed without sleep. The next 2 days felt like walking around with a secret taped to his chest. At the truck, customers came and went, unaware that Darius's life was shifting under his feet. He cooked, he smiled, he joked with regulars, but his mind kept returning to that corner, to Owen's hands trembling around the tray, to Harrison's voice on the phone. I'm watching. It bothered Darius more than he wanted to admit, because being watched had been a theme in his life long before Harrison Bennett showed up. Watched in stores, watched by police cars rolling slow, watched by people who assumed his blackness came with danger. The difference was, Harrison's watching had been wrapped in the word safety. Safety for whom? That question sat in Darius's chest like a stone. On the second evening, Sloane sat in the truck again, drawing. Daddy, she said casually, if we go to that rich house, will they have a pool? Darius snorted. Maybe. Sloane nodded thoughtfully. I don't know how to swim. You can learn, Darius said. Sloane's eyes brightened. Can I get floaties shaped like unicorns? Darius laughed. We'll see. Sloane tapped her marker against her notebook. But, her voice softened. If you go there, you won't be here. Darius paused, spatula hovering. He looked at her. I'll still be your daddy, he said gently. Sloane stared at him for a long moment, then nodded like she was filing that away. I know, she whispered, but you won't be on the corner. Darius's throat tightened. He hadn't realized how much Sloane associated him with this place, the truck, the corner, the smell of smoke and spice, the way their life had become a routine they survived together. He crouched beside her stool. Listen, he said softly. If we go there, it's because I want things to be easier for you, better. Sloane's eyes studied his face like she was trying to see the truth behind his words. Will you still cook? She asked. Darius smiled. Always. Sloane's shoulders eased. Okay, she said. Then, with the blunt honesty only a kid could have, because your food makes people not mean. Darius's chest tightened. He thought of Owen, the way he'd softened when he ate. He thought of Harrison, kneeling. Maybe Sloane was right. Maybe food didn't just fill stomachs. Maybe it softened sharp edges. That night, after the truck was cleaned and parked, Darius sat at the kitchen table again with the business card. He looked at the address like it was a cliff. Then he picked up his phone and typed a message. Darius. Tell Mr. Bennett I'll come tomorrow at 3. No, the response came immediately. Claire. Confirmed. Thank you, Mr. Coleman. Please check in at the gate and show the card. Someone will escort you. Darius stared at the message. Someone will escort you. He didn't know why that phrase made him feel both safe and small. He set the phone down, stared at the wall, and exhaled. Tomorrow, he would step into a world that wasn't built for him. Tomorrow, he would carry his dignity like a shield. Tomorrow, he would find out whether the door Harrison Bennett offered was a chance or a cage. The morning of the meeting arrived with a sky the color of steel. Darius woke up early, even though he hadn't slept much. He made Sloane breakfast, eggs, toast, a few strawberries he'd bought despite the price because she loved them. Sloane ate slowly, watching him. You're wearing your good shirt, she observed. Darius glanced down at the dark button-up he'd ironed carefully. Yup, Sloane chewed, thoughtful. Are you nervous? Darius almost lied. Then he remembered her words. Don't be scared. He leaned his elbows on the table. Yeah, he admitted. A little. Sloane nodded, like that was acceptable. It's okay, she said. I get nervous before spelling tests. Darius laughed softly. Yeah? Sloane's eyes were earnest. But then, I do it anyway. Darius stared at his daughter, heart full and aching at once. Smart girl, he murmured. After breakfast, he dropped Sloane off at school. Her teacher smiled and greeted him, unaware that Darius's world was on a hinge. On the drive back, Darius's hands tightened around the steering wheel. His old car rattled a little on the freeway, as if reminding him where he came from. He stopped at a red light and glanced at himself in the rearview mirror. A black man in his 30s, shoulders broad, eyes tired but steady. A father, a worker, a man who had built a life from scraps and stubbornness. He didn't look like someone who belonged at Bennett House, but belonging wasn't always about appearance. Sometimes it was about purpose. Darius reached into his pocket and felt the business card. The edge pressed against his thumb like a promise. He started driving toward the hills. The city changed as he went. Row houses gave way to larger homes. Corner stores gave way to quiet streets. The noise softened. The air seemed cleaner, like even the atmosphere had a budget. By the time he reached Windmore Hills, and the streets were lined with tall trees that looked older than struggle. And then he saw the gate. Tall, black iron, floodlights, cameras angled down like eyes. Darius pulled up and parked. He stepped out of the car and felt the cold settle into his bones. He walked toward the gate, business card in hand. A guard approached, face neutral, posture professional. "You're delivering?" the guard asked, and Darius heard the assumption hidden in the question. Darius didn't flinch. He held up the business card, thick and white, and said calmly, "I'm here to see Mr. Bennett." The guard looked at him, then at the card, then back at him like he was trying to reconcile the three. "Name?" the guard asked. Darius inhaled. The air smelled like wet gravel and money. "Darius Coleman." The guard lifted his radio, and as the static crackled, then Darius stood at the boundary between two worlds, feeling the weight of his choices in his palm. Behind him, a corner with streetlights and sizzling grills where he knew every crack in the pavement. Ahead of him, a house with cameras and quiet, where a boy held a sandwich like it was safety. Darius tightened his grip on the card. He didn't know what waited beyond the gate, but he knew why he was here. For Sloan, for the promise he'd made, and maybe, just maybe, for a kid named Owen Bennett, who had looked at him with hungry eyes and found something warmer than food. The gate buzzed. Slowly, the iron arms began to open. If this story touched a place in you, the part that knows what it means to keep going for someone you love, leave a little message for Darius in your mind. Sometimes that's where hope starts. Not loud, not perfect, just real.